Before we begin today's session, please know that all of us at NYU hope you and your family are safe and well in these very unprecedented times. We are so thankful you have chosen to spend some of your time with us and continue learning from the collective knowledge of our NYU community by tuning into today's session, At Home with Alexa Loken, How to Start and Grow a Business in COVID. The NYU Alumni Association represents over 600,000 alumni all over the world. On average, we host nearly 700 events annually to connect you with your alumni community and with NYU. If you have questions during the session, please enter them into the chat box on your screen. We will get to as many questions as we can at the conclusion of the program. Today's session features Alexa Loken, founder and head coach of Loken Careers, a firm she has been running for the past 6 years. Previously, she has worked at Indeed.com as a career coach for software engineers, started 2 other business ventures, and began her career in the nonprofit world. She is also a business professor at St. Edward's University in Austin, Texas, and at University of Colorado, Boulder. Lastly, thank you to those of you who filled out the pre-event survey in advance. Again, we will have a Q&A session at the conclusion of the program, so do feel free to submit your questions via chat throughout the presentation. We will get to as many questions as we can. You will also receive a link to a recording of this program at the conclusion. Alexa, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, hello. I love the slight New York soundtrack in the background, but there were no sirens, so that's good. I am currently in Colorado. Like Amanda said, I am in Austin most of the year, but it's a COVID year, so we're still up in Colorado. And yeah, I would love to talk to you guys all today about entrepreneurship and how to start a business. I also apologize, I have a small baby, so if she makes a bunch of noise, hopefully she will be going on a walk soon. So let me share my screen here, and we can get started. So double checking, can you guys all see those slides? Maybe, thumbs up? Okay, perfect. So we're going to talk about how to start and grow a business in COVID. And I am going to be as available as possible. I would love to have this be interactive. I honestly don't get a lot out of just talking at people for an hour. I would much rather have this be a conversation. You ask questions, and we can make it as specific and useful as possible. So like Amanda said, feel free to use the chat feature. At the conclusion as well, feel free to turn your video on and verbally ask a question, like old school. So yeah, I'll get started. I grew up on the West Coast. I went to undergrad in DC, grad school in New York, lived in Hawaii for a hot second, and then did not particularly love island life, and so moved to Austin and now split my team between Austin and Colorado. My background is more in the strategy marketing world. I've started a marketing firm. I started a recruiting firm. I started career coaching and also business coaching. So 2 of them have been quote unquote failures, like one folded and one I was bought out of when I co-founded. So I'm very familiar with how exciting and also distressing entrepreneurship and starting a business can be. I kind of equate it to a roller coaster. So most people's jobs kind of fall between these lines. And I think when you're starting your own business, you have to have that passion. So you get really excited. And then it also is like very upsetting or stressful or, insert negative adjective. So the highs are higher and the lows are lower, which is great sometimes, but also like a lot more of an emotional turmoil situation. So I've started my businesses with an eye towards just loving being useful. I like helping, I like promoting other people and promoting good causes. So if you know anything about the Enneagram personality type, I am very much a type 2 helper. And knowing kind of what you're motivated by, I think is a helpful way to gauge just what you need in either a job or a company or whatever. So like Amanda was saying, I mainly am a career coach. I run a career coaching business. I also run this Loken business coaching business. And then I teach entrepreneurship at CU Boulder when I'm up here. And then when we are down in Austin, I teach business communications at St. Edward's. I also just this last week started teaching are coaching with a really, really cool nonprofit called Girls with Impact. So it's made for high school girls, and I am coaching them through like a semester-long program of how to start a business. So it's also fully virtual, and it started pre-COVID, so they were ahead of the curve. And yeah, I've worked in nonprofits. I worked in Indeed and tech, so I've kind of been all over the place. So to start, kind of differentiating what's career coaching. So I usually help people figure out what they want to do. Like I talk to a lot of lawyers, a lot of teachers, a lot of people who are, in their 40s or 50s and have not liked what they've been doing, but don't know what else to do. So what I tell them is to take their current skills, add in what they've done and their knowledge, and kind of figure how you can transfer that into a new area that you're excited about, while paying attention to where do you physically want to live? How much money do you need to make? Like the logistics. So all of that is like, what do you want to do? What is going to make you happy, quote unquote, when you grow up, whether that's 22 or 82. And then the difference, I think, with business coaching, which is what we're focusing on today, is how to do all that while also starting this business. So helping people to either start or grow, taking a current idea and turning that into an actual implementation. So you're taking the plan, you're assessing its weaknesses, you're kind of identifying any gaps. I think what's really useful is to not just be by yourself. I'm very much a collaborative thinker. I do well kind of talking my thoughts out loud. And so I think a lot of people really need some support, some advice, like being by yourself in a vacuum, particularly in COVID, when it's already extra stressful, is really hard. And so having someone, whether it's me or other support system to talk to, is useful. So I would say making sure that you are like getting advice, again, whether it's the internet or whoever, is one of the best things you can do. And then also paying attention to like your ideal client, what do they want? Like if you're just creating this business and you think it's going to be for, I don't know, 17-year-old boys, and then you don't ever survey what 17-year-old boys are wanting, then that's probably not very great. Like you want to make sure that whoever you're talking with is actually wanting the product or service and will pay X amount of dollars. So having a good idea of like your client profile, and then as well as if you do have co-founders, which we'll talk about in a little bit, making sure that you're paying attention to their, exit strategy and their financial, emotional needs as well. So all of that is important. And then, then something like COVID comes along, or, I'm sure there'll be things in the future that may not have such an impact, but you just kind of always have to be on your feet to, and I hate the word pivot, but to pivot as needed. You kind of rinse and repeat, reassess as you go along. So for today's talk, Amanda was lovely and sent out a poll. And so I grabbed some of those answers because that's how I wanted to focus today, is to be the most useful for specific people on the talk. So I think about 40 people answered. So in terms of, do you have a business idea? The vast majority of you said yes. So I would love if you would be willing to unmute yourself and actually just say really quickly what your business idea is. Just, like 5 seconds. If anybody is feeling like they want to share, that would be wonderful.
Hi, this is Ruth.
Hello.
And hi, I am looking at trying to create a holistic health collective.
Ooh, I like that. Very cool. Okay, so service-based?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Anybody else?
Hi, my name is Lauren. I'm a speech language pathologist, and in August, I launched a speech therapy private practice.
Ooh, very exciting. Congrats.
Thank you.
Anybody else want to share? Feeling brave?
Hey Alexa, it's Erica. I wanted to start a business for doing disaster preparedness and business of continuity of operations for small and mid-sized companies.
Very cool. Okay, so service-based or product-based?
Service-based for the most part, but the
Okay.
product would be training and whatnot.
Yeah, so like mostly consulting?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Very cool. Thank you so much.
Hey, it's Ruth again. I just wanted to say, I didn't say this, I am now a massage therapist with my own existing independent business.
Congrats. So dual entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Yeah, my name is Alyssa. I make movies. I'm a filmmaker, and my goal is to have a transmedia company making video games and films.
Very cool. That sounds so mysterious to me. I know very, very little about that world. I'm actually doing a podcast on Monday with someone who's a producer, just because I wanted to learn more about kind of the entertainment and filmmaking world. So interesting.
Hi, my name is Jennifer, and I'm starting a food business.
Okay, like consumer packaged goods or?
Consumer packaged goods, yes.
Okay, very cool.
Hi, I'm Gina. I'm starting a few online businesses like reviews and blogging, and it relates to affiliate marketing, which as well, which is new to me. So so I know you do marketing stuff. So anything that could advise in that realm would be great.
Yeah, awesome.
Hi, I'm Stacy. I actually have two businesses. For about 2 years, I've had a newborn care business. So I'm like a night nanny. And I also just started a money coaching business. So all online, mostly Instagram, which I'm 37. So getting into that whole Instagram world is like a little new and challenging, but
yeah,
it's been fun.
Very cool. Yeah, my husband ran a financial coaching business for a little while and he really loved it. Where are you based?
I'm in Metro Detroit.
Okay, I was like, if you happen to be in Colorado, I have a 1-month-old, so that would be lovely to use your other business as well.
Next time you have another, when you have another one, you let me know.
Questionable, but cool. Anyone else want to go before I move along?
Hi, I'm Edgar, and I'm working on a consulting business for manufacturing systems.
Oh, okay, very cool. I like the variety that we have here. Anybody else?
I'm Michelle. My friend and I are thinking of starting a cafe that does kind of breakfast and lunch with sandwiches on focaccia bread. And I'm in Los Angeles.
Okay. Ooh, that would do really well. I'm like thinking about it because I'm so hungry. That sounds great. Anybody else? All right. Sorry to be staring off at I got 2 monitors recently. I feel very fancy. Okay. So in terms of, again, just assessing what you all said, there were more people, slightly more, that said they wanted to start a business, though a few people said they already have them and wanted to grow their current ventures. And then in terms of, I asked people to pick their top 3. So the areas that I wanted to try and focus in on, and feel free to hold me to this, are scaling, marketing, strategy, and creative income streams. Those were the top choices for focusing today. The vast majority of you said going over a business plan would be useful. So that was good because I was thinking that would not be useful. So I'm glad I asked. And then if it's a product or service-based business, I always like to ask, the majority of you said services. I have, to be honest, just more experience with service-based business because that's what I have done. Although a lot of my business coaching clients have had products. There's pluses and minuses to each product. It's more logistics, it's more upfront cost, it's more supply chain. But I also honestly think it's easier to market. Like it's easier to market a physical good than it is like an idea of a service. So plus and minus. Okay, so how we're going to spend our hour / 45 minutes left is talking about idea creation, viability of ideas, about writing a business plan, like the how-tos, the components, pricing and finances, really, really important. And I think a lot of people who have that passion, interest, especially that are more on the creative artistic side, like to skip over this. It is not my favorite section, but I do think it is a really important section. Operations and logistics we'll touch on, but like I'm not a CPA, I'm not a lawyer, and also none of you had particular interest in those areas. I thought it was funny, no one picked COVID like pivoting, which is part of the title of this. So that's fine. I mean, we don't need to focus on it, just intriguing. Marketing strategy is one of my favorite parts. Goal setting, scaling, pivoting, networking and mentors. I always like to throw in here basically in any, even if I'm doing like interview prep or job searching, I like to throw in networking and mentors, and then a quick Q&A at the end. So moving along, idea creation is important, right? Like you need to have an idea. I talk to people all the time, and this is fine, but that say they want to start a business, but they don't know what they want to start. And that's fine. And you just need to kind of get there. So I think there's a lot of different ways you can go about it. There's a really great, sorry for my dogs. There's a really great like visual way to go about it if you don't want to sit there and just come up with ideas. So it's called a fizzle sketch. You can Google it. It's basically a one-page business plan that you just kind of, you could even draw in the sections. You can like do bullet points. You can do a sentence or two, but instead of having to do, 1, 3, 4 pages per section, you're just doing some initial thoughts. So it's a really good way in a one pager to get your ideas onto paper or screen. So I think that's interesting, but that's also if you already have like an ideation phase of, I want to do something with shoes or trees or whatever. So I think the very initial step is clearly like how to come up with an idea. What I would recommend is sitting down. I mean, there are lots of workbooks and exercises and et cetera, but I really like just sitting down and thinking about what are you interested in? Like for me, I love reading. I love people. I really love traveling. So just kind of making a list of like, what brings you joy? What are you interested in? And then kind of going in an offshoot of like, where there's a gap that is there? Where could you possibly be filling a hole? Or, what do you want to jump in on? Like, you don't need to be the first person, like for instance, the focaccia sandwich shop, like, it's not like there isn't another sandwich shop in the world. People have been eating sandwiches for a while. So it doesn't need to be like the most original world-changing idea. You can have an idea that someone else has already had. You're just kind of branding it slightly differently. You're filling a geographic need that may not have been there. You're kind of figuring out what your little niche is. And I think that that is really the differentiating factor. Like there are many other career coaches in the country/world. But, I started a business doing it as well. And I kind of differentiate myself in different ways and factors, and everybody has their own style, and that works well in terms of having a variety of clients out there. So just making sure that you have the market fit is useful, but having competitors that are similar to you is totally fine. In terms of writing a business plan, I think it's really useful to have all the sections that you don't want to think about. Like for instance, for me, when I was starting my very first business, I went through and wrote a few paragraphs about each section, and clearly like the legal side, the taxes side, the finance side were the things I did not like as much, or like wasn't as passionate about initially, because, they had a couple sentences. And when I asked for feedback, all of the people that read it were like, red flag, you need to have more information here, which was really helpful. So I would say you want to have, the operations, you want to have the initial, like the actual what are you doing, the idea. You want to have who is going to be doing different things. Like, are you bringing co-founders in? Are you bringing contractors in? Are you hiring employees? How are you setting up your entity? What's your income streams like? How are you paying for this? Do you need to get a loan up front? And then move into the other things, like the secondary things, like marketing. How are you going to get customers? Are you going to have a website? Are you going to have a physical stall? Are you going to create, like you should, but are you going to create a logo? Do you need to copyright your name, website? Like there's many, many things that you can just keep stressing out about, but you kind of want to pick the base foundation first and then build up from there. I mean, I've been running my business for 6 or 7 years, and there's always things like, I want to redo the website. I should do this. I need to do that. There will literally be always more things to do. So you just need to decide what is a next priority and like make a goal and make a timeline and then continue to work through there. I use Asana. It's a free task management, it's like a scheduling tool and a Post-it note together online. So I have my assistant in there. I can like tag her in things. I basically give myself dates and just throw in ideas of what I want to do. And so every morning when I open that, I see what do I need to do, and I can like check things off and move through my list. So I'm a big list maker fan, but to each your own. I would also say in terms of like resources, using your connections is helpful. People are so excited. I think entrepreneurship to a lot of people is like an exciting, sexy idea. So reaching out to friends, reaching out to connections, neighbors, for instance, if you're trying to figure out what the right type of client is or how much they would find that person in your connections in your network and ask them. Like, don't just like think about it, get actual real feedback. Local businesses, there's nonprofits, there's usually like a community like Chamber of Commerce where you are that will give you free advice. I would say honestly, like reaching out to any sort of entrepreneurship group, club, meetup. It may not necessarily be initially like directly helpful, but it'll give you the community as well of like-minded individuals, which is really helpful. And then on my website, there's also a resources page about all these different types of books and blogs. Like I mentioned, I started a podcast a couple years ago, and a large number of those people are entrepreneurs. So kind of whichever way, if you want to listen or read or however you imbibe information, figuring out, like, for instance, I really need to visually see it. Like I need to read it in a book. I like a visual picture. And so, looking at different types of physical business plans was really helpful in my mind. And then also kind of seeing what the steps are in terms of how to start like from beginning to end, and kind of making like a little visual map of what I was going to do was helpful, but some people might think that's horrible and they need to listen to it. So like I mentioned, you could do SCORE is a business plan template. If you Google that, the Fizzle Sketch is also another initial step, but the Fizzle Sketch, for instance, if you're looking for funding, is probably not going to be comprehensive enough, but it's a really good start to move you in that direction, especially if you're feeling stuck. So in terms of the components, executive summary is usually going to be a very short, like a page or less, the very first thing that is there. You should do this last. I highly recommend it being the last thing you do because it should be concise, and it is hard to be as concise as is needed until you've really worked through all the rest of the steps. So it's counterintuitive, but that would be my recommendation. And then I really think it's useful to do a SWOT analysis, which, bringing us back to high school, college, is the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So literally making like a little chart and seeing, who else is a competitor in this space, who is doing this well, who else is doing this but charges too much, or does this really well but has poor branding, or kind of looking at what else is out there. Like a competition analysis is really helpful, and just trying to kind of see what your demographics are. Like, what is an ideal audience for you? You may think your ideal audience member is a 70-year-old woman, and instead it is, a 30-year-old man or whatever. I'm just giving you random examples here, but I think you thinking about it and then you actually testing it and then you deciding actually what it is, I would go in trying to not have as many like preconceived ideas as possible. Like, you want to kind of create a customer profile in your head, but just be very open to it evolving as you're getting more information in. Or for instance, maybe you're like, well, that market's really well served. I should kind of pivot and do this other market because they need my product or service and no one is addressing them. So just very much being flexible as you go through and create your idea, and knowing that information is power is very useful. I also think it's helpful to do a little bit of history. So in addition to your competitor research, like figuring out who has been in the space before, how did this come about, doing some like history in your geographic area, if it's a physical business, is helpful. Just kind of knowing the space, if you're trying to talk about what you're doing and someone else knows more than you do about your business, that's not ideal. So making sure that you can kind of be aware of any tangentially related information. And then one of my favorite parts, the marketing plan, I think is kind of the make it or break it. Like, you need the idea, you need to have done your research, you need to have, all of the finances, et cetera. But I think what makes a great business versus a lot of businesses that fold is that branding, design, promotion. So like, best idea, if you don't brand it and you don't promote it, no one will know. So I think making sure that you hire someone or find someone, if you don't have the skills, to create a logo, to create your like color palette, the look and feel matches what you want. Maybe you come up with a couple adjectives of how you want like customers to react, and share that with your designer and hope that you're on the same page. And then that you're promoting it well. I ironically don't do much marketing for my career coaching, which I should, but you know, I've been lucky enough to have just word of mouth referrals. That just takes time. So knowing that you can promote it, you can pay money to promote it, you can promote it in a lot of ways for free just by using your own time to ask for reviews or create, you know, like if you want to go down the path of doing AdWords or pay per click, just knowing that you can't do everything. And again, kind of picking the lowest hanging fruit, like what is going to make the most impact at this current moment, and then moving your way up. So first of all, like you probably need a website. You probably want to get a phone number. You want to create social media pages, possibly, probably, and kind of working your way through all of that as you go through it. And also then making sure that you're finding the right people. So I can't remember who said this, but you know, creating your Instagram. If your clients are solely on Instagram, you probably need an Instagram. If they are only on LinkedIn, or they're only on Facebook, or you know, they only are checking their your website on their phone, you need to make sure it's mobile friendly. So you need to go meet your consumer and be aware of where they're coming from. Google Analytics is an awesome free tool. Once you have your website up, you can kind of see in the back end, like which devices people are coming in, where are they coming, what pages do they go to, how do they use your site. So that's really useful to kind of pay attention to and make sure that you're, you know, addressing the website pages, for instance, where a client's coming in, or if there's a huge drop-off rate, like why is that? So just getting more information again is great. And making sure the content matches. So like, what are you saying? What types of terminology are you using? Does it make sense? I'm a big fan of like, just be simple, like make it as easy as possible. You don't need to overcomplicate things. You don't need to sound too fancy. Just get the point across in as few words as you can. And then I think operations is really important. Like, what is your legal structure? The first thing, and this is on a future slide, but the first thing I'd recommend doing is creating an LLC, a limited liability company, so that if anything ever happens, if you ever get sued, you as a person do not get sued, you as a business do. So if you have any savings or house or your own finances are separate, like get a business bank account and separate things out. And go see a CPA, go see a business CPA, a tax person who will help you and give you advice on what you should do. For my businesses, I do not need to pay quarterly sales tax, but for my first business, I did. It's extremely variable from state to state, from business to business. Taxes, when you are an entrepreneur, kind of just suck. So just know that you're going to have to pay a fair amount of money out at the end of the year, because you are your own employer. So if you're not taking money out of your paycheck, then you're going to need to save it somewhere so you can pay it at the end of the year. And there are a lot of things you can do to have write-offs, but just be aware that you will probably have a larger tax bill than you would if you were not an entrepreneur. In terms of management summary, again, like who is going to do what? You know, I knew that I wanted to bring a couple people on like an advisory board level to help me with finances and the legal stuff. I've started a business with a couple other people before. Mostly I run my businesses now, but have a team of contractors below me. They actually will invoice clients and then pay me back a commission, which is lovely and much easier than what I used to do, which was have a team of contractors. I would invoice clients, pay the contractors, and then I would get the leftover. So you can do it a bunch of different ways depending on what makes sense for your business, but having a team for me is really nice, again, just because I'm not in a vacuum, and I can then hand off. For instance, if someone wants resume or cover letter, I don't see them. I send them out to another person on my team. I just see people who want career coaching. Financial plan, super important. There are many ways to do this. You could work backwards, you could work forwards. There are things called like the cost of goods sold, COGS. There's lots of different ways you can calculate these out. You can Google it, but I would just say make sure that you are really calculating out, you know, for instance, are you needing a certain amount of money to live? Work backwards. Or, you know, do you think that consumers are going to pay $20 for your, you know, cup or whatever? And then kind of work forwards to what you need to make just making sure that you are creating projections and models that are based in reality of how you think your business will scale and how fast you think you can get customers to be buying your product or service. In terms of how you're paying yourself, it gets complicated if you have co-founders, because you're going to have to talk about how to share equity, which is a whole other hour-long webinar we can go through. But co-founders and equity sharing is really complicated. The short talk is, make sure you're all on the same page. Definitely draw up a legal agreement, even if they're your best friend. And then figuring out how you're going to pay yourself. So for instance, for me, I transfer money from my business bank account into my personal bank account about every 2 weeks ish. And then I leave $1,500 in there so that Chase does not charge me a monthly fee. If you use like a credit union or a lot of other banks, you don't have to have a minimum, but try and give yourself some sort of either frequency with which you will pay yourself or minimum amount or something if you can. I think it's hard to be in limbo and not have some sort of stability. Or possibly you're starting this while you still have another job. I've done that as well. It was easier for me to start a business while working full time. It's just you have way less time to do it, but financially and emotionally it was less stressful, but it was also my second one. So I don't know if it would have been the same if it was my first, but there are lots of different ways to do it, and just making sure that you're fitting it within your needs is what's most important. We kind of talked through a little bit of this, but figuring out, is your service or product, is it going to be an hourly charge? For instance, are you charging $60 an hour for massage, or I hope you're charging more, or are you charging a set rate, for your consulting? Is it a package deal? If you can get some sort of subscription product, that is highly recommended. Subscription is like, consistent money every week or month or quarter or year. That is kind of the goal, like it's the cash cow. That being said, I don't actually have it for career coaching because I feel my goal is to get clients like off and flying free on their own. So to each their own. I think, like we talked about, doing your market assessment and figuring out your own gut check, your friends and families or potential clients, like what is it that you can charge? How is this going to work financially for you? And then what do you need to live on is also really important. So figuring out kind of, is this realistic? Again, using goals, making sure they're really those SMART goals, like the measurable, actionable, et cetera, making sure that's going to fit with a real timeline. I can say I'd love to start a business tomorrow and have it be, a multi-billion-dollar business in a month, but like, is that going to happen? Probably not. So figuring out how much my reach and financial projections are going to happen over what time period is really useful. It can be a little depressing sometimes, but I think it's really important. And we talked about co-founders, we talked about paying yourself. I would say another thing is just really important and is often kind of glazed over, but what does success mean for you? This is something I personally struggle with, like still, like for me, success, the word, I think of someone, in their 30th story wearing their stilettos and a power suit. However, that sounds horrible for me personally. So for me, success is having time flexibility, having financial flexibility, being happy and feeling useful, but everybody's different. So like, is success a certain dollar amount? Is it a certain number of people served? Is it that you're happy, that you love what you're doing, something else? Like figuring out what your criteria is and what successful means, specifically at certain timeframes, like in a year from now, 3 years, 5 years, highly recommend writing those down so that you have something that you're trying to work towards instead of, otherwise you're kind of just aimlessly floating. Operations logistics, like I said, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a CPA. Please don't quote me on this. I know it's being recorded, which is a little terrifying, but every company does have to have some structure, right? And you do have to deal with taxes. There are some really cool organizations, and they're in most major cities are like these free days that small businesses can utilize these services. So I'd say Google it wherever you are. I know Austin has it. I know Denver has it. In terms of like small business day is usually something what it's called. And then you can talk to a lawyer for a half hour, or you can make an appointment with a CPA for a half hour, usually for free or at like really low rates. And at the very least, you know, for instance, the first year I ran my business, I went to a CPA and just like had them talk to me about like what I should do in terms of how to keep records and what I need to do for if I want to write things off, et cetera. So you could also do, you know, research online or talk to a friend or whatever. But for me personally, I'm a sole proprietor LLC. My business, because I'm in Texas most of the time, is registered under the Texas Comptroller, which literally you just go to the Texas Secretary of State website and register yourself. And I think it's like $200. It's not free, but it's not a crazy amount of money, and you only need to do it once. And like I said, for this, I don't need to pay quarterly taxes or I don't need to pay quarterly sales tax, but I do pay clearly taxes at the end of the year. So in terms of how to be efficient and not complicating things, another resource I would recommend like so highly, I've read this book 2 or 3 times, is called Company of One. And again, that's also on the website resources page that I'll share at the end, but it's such a useful book. I read this book and I feel like I had an aha moment of, wow, like I don't have to just keep growing for growth's sake, and I don't need to overcomplicate things. You know, I don't need to feel bad that I don't want to wear a suit every day, whatever it is. So I really, really liked this book. It's basically just like, if it's not working anymore, or you don't want to scale or whatever, like just move along and keep things simple. Like I said, create a business bank account, keep your personal and business money separate. And there are some other books and resources as well that I will share at the end. But my favorite part of all this is the marketing and promotion. So I would say you want to make sure that you're positioning yourself well in the market. You want to make sure that you are aware of your audience and you're targeting them correctly. Again, if you are trying to reach, you know, 17-year-olds, you probably don't want to be on LinkedIn. You know, you probably want to be aware of TikTok or maybe even Instagram or whatever. And also, honestly, if they're under 18, you need to be aware of some legality issues. If they're under 13, you like really need to be aware. So there's just a lot of individual markets to understand and how to reach them, especially in COVID. Some of you have businesses that are a physical location, and I think post-COVID, that's both, like I said, easier and harder. You know, you can have a physical sign, you can have people actually walking up to you, but you also need to get people to like come out of their house and come find you. So something like Yelp, you know, getting reviews, all of that helps in terms of getting your Google ranking to be higher just organically. The more people that you can have coming and ranking is useful. So I think the branding, like I said, the visual design, the content, so important. What do you want people to take away? What do you want them to think or feel? You know, black and red together as a combination does not say like gentle, calm. At least to me, that's like pretty aggressive, which is fine if that's, you know, you're like a karate studio. So knowing what kind of feel you're going for is really useful to try and kind of work backwards with that branding guide. I would say it's really important once you have kind of the basic structure and idea and implementation of your business is sit down and create a marketing plan or hire me to help you create a marketing plan, but have a stellar marketing strategy plan, have your promotion tactics, just know how you're going to reach your audience, like what different channels are you using, you know, are you creating that content? Are you hiring an intern? Are you hiring a copywriter? You know, just who's doing it? What are you doing? How are you doing it? What is it saying? All of those kind of the 4 W's is really, really important. And doing it over a certain timeline. So I really like doing a year-long plan, and then you can plan by quarter within that. You know, the world is very cyclical. And so knowing, for instance, your marketing around the holidays is going to be different than your marketing in July. And also that you can kind of, as needed, adjust when things, you know, for instance, like the marketing in a year from now, post-COVID, hopefully, is going to be very different than it is right now in terms of if you have a massage studio or whatever it is. So I would really recommend using your connections. What I did is I literally wrote a list of like anyone I knew that I thought would be useful to give me feedback or knew a lot of other people or had been in this industry or had started a business, wrote a list, And then I kind of prioritized them on who I wanted to help with what, and then literally like sent them my business plan or asked for their feedback on my website or asked them to barter with me to create a logo, or, you know, feel free to use your connections and network, or use NYU's connections and network. And then kind of, like I said, always be open to reassessing. So every year create a new marketing plan, and kind of see what's working and what hasn't. I'm going to skip over this a little bit just because no one said they wanted to know about like how to pivot during COVID times. But I think that it would be interesting just to see, like, you know, there are a lot of new businesses like masks, for instance, a lot of new businesses that have come up. A lot of other businesses, unfortunately, like restaurant retail spaces have kind of been either shuttered or kind of put on hold. So again, just looking for those gaps or niches to fill, and figuring out, you know, how can you take your current idea and adjust it or readjust it to be a useful service or product that people want in the current marketplace. So again, staying on point for branding, like you don't want to be, you know, promoting anything, for instance, that's like in-person interaction right now, or like singing into each other's face, or you want to be aware of what's happening in the community, locally and globally, and make sure that you are staying, you know, just that you're kind of within that space and that you're not being offensive, honestly. And then you're adjusting as needed, your financial flows, your pricing updates, your expectations. So lastly, I just want to talk about finding a mentor. So mentors are the best. I have had a half dozen of them over the years. And honestly, I think probably half of those have no idea that they are my mentors. So you don't need to sit down and be like, okay, you are my mentor and I am your apprentice or whatever. You can just use them as a resource, as, you know, for their knowledge, whether it's support or anything else. But I would say really make sure that it's a two-way street, that you are not just trying to suck their, you know, mentor goodness out of them, that you're also giving them back something, whether it is, I mean, and I can be financial payment, but I would say whether it's, you know, you make them a meal every time they chat with you, or you help their daughter with their something, or I have a really good friend who's a masseuse, like I would help her with her business and she would literally give me a massage and we had a lovely barter. So some sort of relationship barter that you guys can kind of agree on, even if it's just you ask them for advice with, you know, your business and they ask you advice with their child or marriage or whatever, but trying to make sure that you are adding value back to them as well. And then figuring out, you know, do you want to meet with this person once a week, once a month, once a quarter? Are you just going to kind of reach out to them as needed every few months or years? And is it going to be an hour-long interaction? You know, how structured do you need to be? For me, it was probably every month or two, and it'd be about an hour-ish meeting. Most of the time it'd be a video call because they weren't physically in the same location as me. Right now, it probably also is going to be a video call or a phone call. But figuring out, you know, what you're looking for and who and why, and then trying to communicate that. So even if you don't use the word mentor, to communicate to the person you're talking to that you would like to talk to them, you know, at whatever frequency, and ask if that's okay, just communicating so you're on the same page. In terms of how to find a mentor, I would say, you know, your personal connections, any previous managers, whether they actually were like a supervisor or just had more knowledge than you in whatever region. LinkedIn is really useful. NYU clearly has lovely community and connections. So just kind of thinking through, like, how can you find people? Everyone really wants to be helpful, especially in COVID. And so I would say take people up on their offers and just communicate what you're looking for. Lastly, in terms of accountability and networking, like I mentioned, I think networking to find a mentor is useful, but also just networking to talk to other people to make sure that you are surrounded by entrepreneurial thinkers is really useful. There are a lot of people in the world that do not want to start a business, do not want to implement on their passions, etc. That's fine, but that is probably not the most exciting, invigorating, creative environment that you want to be in, at least occasionally, to continue to think through your own ideas and kind of have them mulling back here. If you're ever looking for other co-founders, it's really useful. Angel.co is another useful website for either finding like entrepreneurial ventures to jump into or looking for co-founders. There's a bunch of different websites out there, but just trying to not be by yourself, I think, is really important. I also think it's useful if you want to create an advisory board or have a couple of trusted friends or whatever it is, but kind of have people hold you accountable, you know, like whether it's a coach that you're paying or whatever, that someone at some certain time checks in and is like, so you said you were going to get this, this, and this done. Did you? How's it going? So that you're not missing deadlines that you're making for yourself. And then I would say, just make sure, again, like I started the talk, is be open to being flexible. Like you will probably need to change something, whether it's the name or your demographic or your branding or whatever. Just be open to more information, adjusting your course. And I also really like networking because you are practicing your business pitch. So it's like an elevator pitch, but it's for your business instead of for yourself. And being able to do it in an informal networking way is much better than when you're trying to do it actually to a potential client and or funder. So kind of getting used to talking about your business, practicing kind of what may or may not work, asking for feedback when it's less high stakes is really useful. Okay, perfect. I wanted to have at least 10 minutes. We have 13 to be able to talk through any other questions. So if you have questions that you want to chat, feel free. If you want to verbally ask, that also works. And the slide and the recording will get sent to you later. So if you have any questions, you can always follow up with an email if we don't get to it as well. So I'm going to stop screen sharing and push it over to Amanda for moderating questions, if that's okay.
Sure. Happy to help. So we have a first question from Erica. She asks, if you are starting a business as a side hustle with the intent of it becoming a primary income source, when do you think is the appropriate tipping point to make that change? Obviously, there's always a fear element to taking that leap. So any advice you can give on that point was great.
Yeah, for sure. And that's something that was asked about in the poll that I didn't touch on a ton. So thanks for asking. I'm all about creative income streams. So as a side note, like my husband and I built a tiny house and we have either lived in that and rented our house out or vice versa. Having renters is a great income stream, but clearly you need to be able to then buy the property. So that's a much longer conversation. But I think having side businesses, side hustles, passive income streams are all amazing if you can make it work. For instance, I said that I get a commission from my coaches, which is great for them doing work and me kind of being the pass-through. In terms of being able to know when is the right time, there's no right time. It's never going to feel great, honestly. I think there's a lot you could do, like actually objectively, in terms of make a financial model, like make a plan of what do you need to actually pay bills, and project that out. And, you know, how much are you actually making? How much can you save, or are you saving? So kind of looking through the finances, I'd say, is number one. And then I would recommend you have at least 6 months of savings of runway, you know, and or that you hopefully are making more than you're spending. But just looking at the numbers is my first comment. My second comment is just looking at your emotional sanity or health and seeing, you know, do you want to do this full time? Will you have enough income and lack of stress and stability emotionally, financially, whatever, to be okay? So like I mentioned, my first business, I just started and it was exhausting and scary. And, you know, I was marketing to nonprofits, which inherently have like no profit. And so my second business was much easier because I had, you know, a different target demographic that would pay more, but it was also because it was on the side, but it was also because it was my second business. So starting a first business is kind of always going to be terribly scary, at least for me. But once you start more, they're less scary. And I think if you started on the side, it feels like you have more of a support system, which is really nice. So it's really up to you. I mean, it's the similar question to what I have career coaching clients ask me: should they quit their job before looking for a new job? And the answer is really like, it depends on the person. Like, do you have the finances to do that? And do you have the emotional bandwidth to be okay? Or like, if it's going to stress you out more to not have a job, then you should probably search while you're still in it. So I know I'm not really answering your question, but I would say start with the numbers, the finances, the money, and then look secondly at like your emotional stability. Also, honestly, like COVID's just a rough time all around. So, you know, do you want to sit on it until there is either a vaccine or a vaccine like in the very near future, for your own ability to kind of decide when you want to make these big life choices? If you're like, screw it, I have enough money, I'm really excited, do it today. Great, that's totally wonderful. I am much more kind of make changes, and then if it doesn't work, figure it out later. But some people really like to go the slow and steady route, and there's no like wrong answer. Good luck though.
Thank you. We have had a few questions come through while you were going through that answer. We have a question from Edgar. What resources do you recommend for getting funding? And how do you go about avoiding potential investors that might try to take your idea?
Yeah, so I'll answer the last one first. So I would say no entrepreneur likes to hear this. My personal thought and opinion is someone else has had this idea before, and many other people are going to have it as well. However, the difference is, did you implement on it? So you telling people your idea, very rarely is someone actually going to steal it and do something with it. Like the idea to implementation phase is the hard part. Like that's why everyone doesn't start a business. So I personally think talking about what you're doing is just going to help and be exciting. But some people want to be more secretive, or like if you do have like a time machine or something crazy, like maybe you do keep it under wraps. In terms of funding, again, that's a whole other like hour-long webinar, but I would say there are a lot of different ways to go about it. So my most frequent, or my best knowledge about it, I should say, is like accelerator programs. So there's a cool one called Boomtown. It's based in Atlanta. It's mostly sports, but some tech. There's a lot of different accelerators, like Y Combinator is another one. So you can kind of join one of these programs. Usually how it works is you apply to the program. If you get accepted, you will give a percentage of your equity, like of your company ownership, up to the program, and the program will then coach and guide and support you, and also usually give you funding. So they're giving you the knowledge, they're giving you like mentors, and they're giving you X amount of dollars to kind of have your runway launch. But know that, like, do you want to give up funding? So one thing you could do is get a loan. And a lot of the time then you don't have to give up a percentage of your company. You know, if you're looking for dollars, that is kind of the way I would recommend going, is to go through an accelerator. And then from there, if you're still looking for more money for whatever reason, like maybe you are starting a biotech company or something, then you need to probably go through what is called like the Series A, Series B funding. There's like a whole scale of what type of funding you need when, and kind of what you should be looking for. So I would say just make sure that you know you're at the right, like for how much money you want, that you're at the right series level. Because if you think you're at, you know, getting initial angel investors and you're really like at Series B funding, you're going to get laughed at. So just making sure you know where you are. It's a complicated world. So I'd say try and find someone who is an investor, an angel investor or something, to give you advice about where you should be. And also just know that you're giving up percentage of your company, which like is really hard for a lot of people. If you're ever giving up more than 50% to other founders or investors, then you are giving up your ability to decide where you're going. So make sure that also whoever you're giving equity to has the same exit plan that you do. Like, do you want this to go gangbusters? Are you wanting to sell it, you know, as soon as it gets big? Are you wanting to run it for the next 20 years? Like, just being honest about where you're at is helpful.
Excellent, thank you. Our next question is from Alyssa, who introduced herself before. She mentioned that she's a filmmaker who works freelance for others, but is interested in starting her own projects and company in the film and gaming industry. So she's interested in marketing ideas around how to market her services. She was wondering whether or not she should do two separate companies for, I guess, for the film and game streams,
Mhm.
or if it should be a combined company. And then, of course, that would entail one website versus two,
Yeah.
so on and so forth.
Yeah, that's a good question. This is something I struggle with career coaching and business coaching. I think of them as the same in my mind, but like as an entrepreneur, people don't want to go to a career coach. And as a person who doesn't want to start a business, they don't want to go to a business coach. So for me, I've now split them out into two. I think starting yours with one, and maybe you have a services page where it differentiates it, like you have two separate packages or two separate types of clients, would be helpful. But yeah, I mean, I think it just depends on kind of how, I don't know. I mean, honestly, I would say reach out to a past client or a potential future client, ask them if they'd be turned off by it being one website. I think it's fine, but also I'm not probably the person that would be hiring you. So I think other people would know better. And what was, there was another question at the beginning of that before the two websites, right?
Yes. So also beyond the two websites, whether or not the actual company itself should be one company, because I could imagine you could do two websites for one company, or is that confusing?
Yeah, that also is something I've struggled with. So my first company was Loken Creative, which was a nonprofit marketing firm. And then now what you have to do is go to the bank and then do a DBA, doing business as, for Loken Careers or Loken, like, so what you could do is have one and then have a DBA for the second one, or you can have an umbrella company and have two like sister companies underneath it. Like there's a lot of different ways you could go about it. The one other thing I'd say just to be aware of that you didn't ask about, but is a non-compete agreement. So if you have worked at a company that was doing video game production, that you didn't sign anything saying, I won't start up a business and look for clients that are video game clients within, it's usually 12 months, but it can be all kinds of stuff. So if anyone signed a non-compete, just be aware to not violate that, or to try to not sign one in the future if you're in the same industry.
Excellent. Thank you. I think especially the non-competitive agreement, I think, is a really key thing that some people can forget, especially when you're doing freelance work and you are working with a lot of different parties. Let's see here. So we have 2 minutes left. We do have time for one last question if anyone has one. There was a question that came through, just double checking the Fizzle website. I'll make sure that I pop some of those websites that you've mentioned into my follow-up email that will have the video link. And of course, for all of you on the program, we also will be sharing a copy of the slides as a PDF after the fact. So you'll be seeing that from me via email as well. And if you do have follow-up questions for Alexa that occur to you an hour from now, or if you would like to engage her services through her business, she's certainly open to chatting with all of you about that, and we'll have her contact information available after the fact. Oh, we have one more question from Ida. Forgive me if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly. What are your thoughts on listing multiple entrepreneurial ventures on your LinkedIn that are diverse? So I guess branding.
Yeah, I would say go for it. I think on your resume is one thing because you want to keep to a certain length, like page length, but on your LinkedIn, you could add like all of the things. And I think that's very fine. So I think I have all of mine on my LinkedIn. It's kind of like the throw all of the spaghetti on the wall, and it's okay. Whereas the resume should be either 1 or 2 full pages, and not, unless it's a CV and you have like a billion publications, not go on and on. But yeah, I just wanted to say, I know we're at the top of the hour. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining from all over the country/world. And like Amanda mentioned, if you have any other questions or like, stress dream that pops up tonight or whatever, feel free to email me. I would love to help out and, either be useful or talk more about potentially working together. And regardless, like best of luck to everybody on their business ventures. I'm really excited for all of you. And if you ever need any sort of entrepreneurial community, then I would love to chat more. And yeah, happy Friday.
Thank you so much, Alexa. That was a really great presentation. I think we all got a lot out of it. I know I do every time I get to work with you, and I think that the same can be said for all of our attendees. Now to you attendees, if you're interested in further content like this, please do check out our events calendar on the NYU alumni page under events and programs. As an example of an upcoming program in this vein, next Tuesday, November 17th at 6 p.m. Eastern, the Mid-Career Alumni Network is hosting Getting Your Story Straight, Personal Branding for Career Success. So I think that ties into that branding question we had at the end there. Again, thank you all for joining us. We here at NYU are wishing you the best of health and safety into this holiday season. And thank you again, Alexa, for joining us today.
Bye. Have a good day, everybody.
Bye, everyone.